And good evening, fellow scribblers, and welcome back to the writing stream. It is Monday. We've got past, well, some of us have, the worst of the day. For those of you who are still in America, never mind, it's lunchtime. Or bits of you are at lunchtime. Some of you are in early afternoon, I imagine, depending on where you are. But anyway, welcome one and welcome all. For those of you who are far ahead of the UK, why aren't you asleep? Or yeah, are you getting up first thing in the morning? I mean, weird. Very strange. I still find it endlessly fascinating that we live on a spherical planet. Of course, yeah, there are people who don't believe that either, but they're mad. Don't talk to them. Don't listen to them at all. Yeah, it's just weird. Yeah, it's a different time of day with different people. I don't know what it is about that. I find that quite fascinating for reasons I don't know why, but there we go. Welcome one and welcome all to the writing scream. The scream. The stream. Let's get the things right. And there we go. Right, so let's do the thing because yeah, everybody's here, which is good. Lovely to see you all. Thank you very much for popping along. Commander Sunak is here, which is excellent to see. Conan's of course here. Yeah, fresh from the invasion of Arrakis. Winter Beauty is here, of course. Dr. Quest MD, Haunted Loaf, Have a Boo Boo, Bilbo Gammons, Sean. Hello, Sean. Commander Tragic Blue, the Shadow Wyvern, Freaky Deaky Dude. Is here as well. Kelly Maglar is here, and he thinks again. Commander Terraformer is here. Excellent, Glenn. Always good to see Glenn. The Arrakis is here, fending off the invasion of the Harkonnens. Commander Duskthorn is here as well. So we're all here. This is all good. Welcome one and welcome all. Now I have noticed the lack of the complaints about the lack of the original intro music to the stream, which I must admit is annoying. Okay, it is not. I'd like to bring it back. We may be able to bring it back. I have been victorious in my YouTube quest to refute the copyright infringement claim on my YouTube video. So that's been good. What I haven't had, however, is any kind of explanation as to why it happened and whether it's still not going to happen. So the problem I'm having is that. Twitch is fine. Okay, so Twitch we can cope with, which is good. But when I upload the videos to YouTube, of course, Twitch has to sort of Twitch and YouTube are slightly different in the way they work. This is a minor aside, but it's sort of vaguely kind of on topic aside. Not for the topic of the stream, but we'll get there. Okay, we will get there. We'll get there. So if you're hanging around going, what's he going to get about YouTube and Twitch? I tuned in for some writing. We will get there. Promise. Okay. So don't worry about that. Basically, so Twitch is kind of like generally a live environment. Yes, you can watch Twitch videos after the event, but they don't hang around very long. I think about a week or 2 weeks or something. So Twitch has to do its kind of copyright checks almost live, and that's something that their technology works. YouTube tends to. I mean, YouTube you can also broadcast live on, but most of YouTube is kind of passive. It's kind of after the events. You upload a video to YouTube. YouTube then checks it. And then if it's okay, it basically says, yeah, you can publish this. So when I upload a video, it goes through multiple stages and YouTube does things, right? And as a result, now I try and be squeakily clean on these things. I don't, having been as a writer, right? I don't really appreciate it if somebody pinches my stuff, claims it's theirs, then tries to flog it for money. That's not on. Okay, that's bad. Don't do that. All right, that's an evil thing. Okay, if you do things like that, you're naughty. Okay, you're bad. You need a slap. Okay, copyright theft is theft. Okay, but. Sometimes you can, inadvertently upload something that's got copyrighted material in it. It's not, that has happened sometimes, which I get. That's the problem. But YouTube's got very, 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 very clever algorithm thing. Okay, what it does is it creates an acoustic signature, which is like a software fingerprint of the content of your videos, and it compares it to its vast library of stuff. And if it finds a match, it basically says, "Aha, you've." You've used somebody else's stuff in your video, and therefore you can't monetize or claim anything on your video, which kind of makes sense. Now, for those of you who watched my old Elite streams years and years ago, well, months and months ago, it's almost a year actually since the last did one of those. I did MIDI renditions of famous tunes, okay, and my MIDI renditions were occasionally, well, most of the time they were pretty ropey, okay, but occasionally they were good enough to trip the copyright censors. In fact, my Airwolf one went off straight away. You put Airwolf in your film. You can't monetize this video. Which, as far as I was concerned, it's a fair cop, Gov. Because it's a fairly recognisable piece of music. But I was quite impressed that, despite the fact I had not composed, that's not quite the right, but I'd made up my own version of the Airwolf theme, and it was thematically the same as the original Airwolf, otherwise you wouldn't recognise it as Airwolf, right? But it wasn't the original, okay? It wasn't in the same key I discovered. I was playing it by ear, and playing it myself in the way that I kind of remember the tune. I wasn't referencing the original in any way other than in my head, and it was good enough. Well, at least my tune was good enough that everyone went, "Yep, that's Airwolf." But it was also good enough that the YouTube algorithm, this digital fingerprinting thing, was able to go, "Aha, that's Airwolf." you can't use that, Drew, without acknowledging it. So I had to acknowledge it, and it acknowledges it then as a cover version, basically. So you get 50% of the proceeds from that bit of the video, and the original person who wrote Airwolf, whoever that was, gets 50% of the money from your video. Now, it isn't very much anyway, so it's not really a big deal, but what I use for the intro for this stream is a piece of music called Work, which is a jolly nice piece of music, written by what's the guy's name? It's on my start screen. I can't remember. Hang on a minute. Kevin Mcleod. There we go. Kevin Mcleod. From a company called Incompetech.com. Now, he specialises in. Sorry, I've just zapped the chat there. Apologies for that. He specialises in providing royalty-free music for people on the internet. And as long as you acknowledge him in your credit somewhere, he's utterly fine with it. He just says, "Go and make some stuff up. Okay, do what you want to do with your music." And I've done that for many, many years. But somebody on YouTube has somehow managed to purloin that particular track. Is he from the clan Mcleod? I don't know. I have to ask him actually one day. Somehow, and I've sent emails trying to figure out exactly what's going on. But somebody's managed to purloin that and claim that it's their copyright. Now, I've complained to YouTube about it, and so has Mr. Mcleod of the clan Mcleod. But YouTube so far hasn't responded to that. Now, what that practically means is that every time I use the Work music, YouTube's automated systems where, "Aha, that's somebody else's copyright," which it isn't, tries to slap a constriction on my videos, and I have to go through a process of complaining. No, I do actually have a license. Here's the license. Da, 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 da. And it basically sits there then for 30 days in kind of like a purgatory of YouTube videos. Until it's unlocked again. So if I put Work in now, until I'm sure that whole thing has been resolved, which YouTube seems to be dragging its heels about, can't do anything, I can't use that piece of music, because otherwise my videos will disappear for 30 days and then they'll suddenly reappear when whoever's at the other end of this is basically, I think, trying to do some sort of copyright trolling of bits of music using licensed but kind of royalty-free music, claiming it's theirs, and hoping that the people on the end of the videos, i.e. people like me, aren't going to contest it, so which means that they can start monetizing other people's videos. That's basically what's happening. So what they were going to, if I hadn't complained about it, what would have happened is the monetization of those videos that I produced, with all my waffle, would go to this nefarious creator of copyright trolling instead of me. That's basically what's happening. So I can't use work at the moment until I know that's been resolved. So yes, it's a really weird kind of criminal attack on the people's videos online who are using royalty-free music, and YouTube doesn't seem to have an answer on how to police it right now. So just beware. So I kind of bumped into this, but I basically thought, well, no. I'm not having this. No, I'm not having this. No, I've got a license. I'm going to complain. So if you are doing anything like that, this is generally for YouTube content creation. Defend your license statement. Otherwise, you'll lose the money from the videos you've produced. Perfectly reasonably. So so it's a bit of a mess actually. So there we are. But what's happened with mine is I get 30 days to basically say, no, that's not fair. The person, once I've submitted my thing, which I do instantly, I get the notification. The person at the other end, the copyright troll, whoever they are, has 30 days to contest my rebuttal of their claim. In the meantime, my video disappears, which is annoying. But at the end of that 30 days, if they haven't done anything, which of course they can't because they've got no legs to stand on, my video suddenly is okay again, which is what's happening to some of my videos. They're all peering back again. Really, really weird. So it's just like, really? But yeah, they that's what they're trying to do. It's really, really weird. So there are sorts of wacky problems with that online stuff nowadays. The nefarious creator of copyright trolling. They're going to be the villain in my next book. I'll have to go to do some sort of contemporary novel again at some point. So yeah, it's weird, but anyway, there we go. Never mind. Right, let's talk about some writing stuff because that's far better than copyright trolls. You presumably live under some sort of copyright bridge. Is that where copyright trolls live? Copyright bridges? I don't know. Anyway, so this is continuing on. This is continuing on with our series on writing stuff. I should grow a beard to confuse my viewers. Will that confuse my viewers, or will it just make them laugh? Freaky dicky dude. It's one thing I ought to try. To be honest, I've never. I've been in places where either I've not packed my razor or I've been kind of trekking the wilderness a bit for a few days, and I get to about. And you can see actually I haven't shaved since this morning because I've got a bit of a 5 o'clock shadow. So yeah, I get to about 3-4 days in, and mine grows quite well, to be honest. I get a moustache and I get a beard, and you can kind of see it already start to happen. It works. I can grow a beard actually physically. However, I get to about 3 days in, and it's just like, oh God, start, there's a check, and I'm not man enough to put up with it, so. It comes off again. So one day I'm going to have to just be marooned, I think, on a desert island for a few weeks, and then I'll grow a proper beard. So weird, really, but there we go. No. Give you a cream. Dear. It's very soft. So anyway, we this evening we need to talk about dialogue. Now this is actually a favourite topic of mine in terms of writing, because it's actually one that can be quite hard to get right, and you see a lot of very, very bad dialogue, quite often in TV shows as well. Although some TV shows are extremely well done and feel very, very natural. There'll be videos of you suddenly with a beard, but it's just it's a month older than the one they've just watched. Yeah. Maybe I could do a reverse one where my beard shrinks in and eventually just disappears. All sorts of possibilities. So anyway, so dialogue. Let's get to the writing stuff. Just some definitions to start with. Obviously, dialogue is basically your characters in the book that you're writing having a chat. Whether they are conveying information to each other, or whether they're shouting at each other, whether they're arguing about each other, whether they're falling in love with each other, whatever they're doing, they have to talk. Okay, they have to talk to each other They may even sometimes talk to themselves. I mean, I'm doing that now, right? Yeah, I mean, you guys are just text on the screen as far as I'm concerned. I am, in fact, talking to myself, here in front of my PC. You know, what you're doing with dialogue, of course, is representing it in the book, okay? And there's a few wacky, odd sort of rules about dialogue, which I must admit, you kind of have to sort of... I find I've just sort of got used to them rather than actually understood them, if that makes sense. So I'm going to have to show you that in a Word document. And treating dialogue in a book to kind of make it work. Now, one of the things that you're trying to do here is you're trying to represent natural speech in your book. So you're switching from things like description, which we talked about the other week, and scene setting and, you know, action scenes and all that stuff, to what the characters actually are saying in that particular part. And depending on the type of book you're writing, the dialogue may be the thing that actually drives the story. Some books will be description driven or action driven. Some books will be more dialogue stroke character driven. I mean, what are the characters saying and doing? And of course, your characters can be, you know, suspicious, duplicitous types of folks, so they may not say the truth. Okay, they might lie. They might tell untruths. They might do things, and they might say things that are at odds with the things that they do. If I'm a figment of your imagination, I was a Jupiter analyst on Danger Money, says Wintermute. It would be quite funny if we ever did have like a DrewCon and anyone would turn up, because anybody could be anybody. They just say, I'm just like have a tag with their username on it, and then we'll go, oh, that's what you look like. Apart from me, because everyone knows what I look like. It'd be really, really unusual. It'd be good to meet some of you in sort of person, to put names to faces. I mean, I've seen a few of you in person, obviously, and some of you I've seen on Facebook, and you know, you've got avatars that hopefully vaguely represent what you actually look like, but most of you not. It's a strange thing, the internet anonymity, isn't it? But yeah. So anyway, so dialogue is talking. Okay, now talking varies a lot. Okay, so there's quite a lot of things you need to consider. Oh, someone to show up with a printed mask on my face. Maybe we should just all wear hats. It could be a hat con. That would be quite good. And there's a few complexities. Now, if you've got, I mean, we talked about this a little bit about, the whole he said, she said, he cried, she yelled, he expectorated, all those sort of things, those qualifiers, I suppose, as I call them. You obviously use them very sparingly. We've talked about that in editing. You don't very often need to do anything other than said. Asked is fine. Queried, responded, for a little bit of variety, but don't go mad about it. So stuff like that is the mechanics of doing the dialogue. And there's a few other bits and pieces. Okay, so there's a bit of grammar associated with it. So I'm not going to bore you too much with the grammar, but it's worth just having a quick look at it. So I'm going to pop you over to my other screen. Hang on a minute. Here we go. Are you ready? Hold on tight. There we go. Okay, so here is a blank piece of paper, which would be something that's very familiar to writers. So let's have a piece of dialogue. Let's do the Arthur Dent one. What the hell was that? Okay, so there's something that Arthur Dent would probably have said. In fact, let's say that. What the hell's that? Question mark, because it is a question. Asked Arthur Dent. Now, interesting enough, notice what Word has auto-corrected there. It's put in because it doesn't know it's dialogue. It's auto-corrected asked with a capital A, which is wrong. But we'll come to that in a minute. Asked Arthur Dent. Right, okay. So that is the actual piece. So now to turn that into a piece of dialogue grammatically. What we have to do now, and this changes a little bit depending on style and country. Okay, so if let's go to the United States. Okay, we're in the United States. Generally, over there, you will use double quotes, what we in the UK call 66s and 99s, and it will look like that. Okay, that should be a lowercase a. Okay. Now, in the UK, you would generally, and this is not always the case because there's always exceptions. Generally, in the UK, we tend to favour the Arthur. What am I talking about? What the hell's that? We tend to favour a single quote. That isn't always the case. Okay. Those are the general rules. There are exceptions, right? So if you are in America, you're probably best off using double quotes. If you're in the UK, probably single quotes. I don't know what the standards are elsewhere in the world, because I don't. So apologies. So you might have to check your local. If you are self-publishing, you can do whatever the hell you like. What the blow is that? My gosh. There's a thing. Yes, that's right. Well, that's the thing. Wow, I say. I wasn't going to do. Well, we can come across that. We will come to that topic in a little bit. Tally ho, old chap. Chocks away. These are not hard and fast rules. You will find English, British, should I say, published documents, books where they don't obey this. And you'll find American published stuff where they don't obey that either. It will vary by publisher. It'll vary by whatever's going on, and also as if you self-publish, you can do whatever you like. Now, I've always done this personally, and that's how I was kind of taught, if you like. But I can see why it's slightly confusing, because if you think about it, there's the opening one, there's the apostrophe, and then there's the closing one. It does look a bit confusing. In some ways, this is more logical because it kind of like, okay, well, that's speech, and that one clearly is the apostrophe. Otherwise, it's kind of like, does it stop there or does it stop? What's going on? Okay. Now, remember also here that Word had auto-corrected the asked to a capital A. Now, you would think grammatically that a capital A there would be right. So it arguably should be that. Okay, now Word is now going to get upset by that because it knows the rules. Okay, it basically knows, aha, yes, but this is a piece of dialogue. Okay, so that is a perfectly formed question. A sentence, shall I say? What the hell's that? Question mark. However, if it's in a piece of dialogue, for some reason there's an exception to the rule that you start the next sentence with a capital letter. Because it's associated, you have to start it with a lowercase one. Even though you've got a terminating piece of punctuation. Okay, it's the same if we do this. Okay, so if we do another one, that's the answer. Okay, full stop. Said, what's the other guy? Full prefix, there we are. Said full, and I've done it with a capital. Okay, said forward prefix. Okay, prefix. There we are. Or obviously there's the British version with the other single. Now, quite why that is, I don't know, right? But it's a rule that you need to follow. It's something that I think to do with, if you want to follow on with another piece of dialogue, which I do a lot of, okay? So if I have a character that's saying something like this, well, comma, let's say Kiri, full stop. I don't know what we're going to do, okay? So it's more better, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's true actually, quite, Glenn, that really should be a comma. And that, I think, is the explanation for it, is that, you have to, that is actually a completely valid sentence. That's the answer, full stop. But actually you have to replace it with the comma to allow it to be part of this. So actually that now becomes a clause, and then that is the sentence, okay? Which also allows you to do this. Well, said Kiri, full stop. I don't know what we're going to do. Okay, so that is the way it's structured. Now, the oddity here comes is when you have a question in a piece of dialogue, the question mark is treated grammatically as a comma, even though it's actually a terminating piece of punctuation in normal usage. All right? I told you it doesn't have to make sense. It's the rules, right? So as long as you know what the rules are, you can follow them. Okay. So there's a few other little bits and pieces that you shouldn't do. So if what you mustn't do is don't put the punctuation outside of the quotes. Okay, don't do that. That's wrong as well. That does make more sense if you look at it down here. It kind of just doesn't look right. So the punctuation goes inside of the quotes. All right. The English, the rules don't make sense on either side. And I don't know if it's the same in other languages as well. It's just one of those weird things, you know, structuring dialogue. Now, the other thing that I find a lot of is, you know, particularly with this example here, is I do a lot of revision. So this might be the first kind of version of what I'm writing. Well, said Kiri, I don't know what we're going to do. Then I might change it to stupid, and again, exclamation marks are like question marks, is that they are pretending to be commas in this circumstance. Stupid, said Kiri, I don't know what we're going to do. And then I might go, no, I need a bit more there. That's so stupid, Kiri said Kiri, I don't know what we're going to do. And then what I tend to find as a stylistic thing is I sometimes go, I want to add, we can't do that. And I might do something like that in revision, okay? That's so stupid, we can't do that, said Kiri. I don't know what we're going to do, okay? What I would recommend stylistically, and again, it's not a rule, but it's a recommendation, is only have one sentence before the initial said, okay? So keep it like that, and then put the second one in like that, okay? We can't do that. I don't know what we're going to do, or maybe that's a semicolon. You can play around with the grammar a little bit more. Try and keep the descriptor of who's saying what early on in the sentence. The reason I say that is that if you have a bunch of stuff, let's have some meaningless things. Okay, just to illustrate a point. This is daft. I don't. This is daft. Okay. Hang on, there we go. Said character 1. Yep, you're right. Said character 2. Then if you have a long sentence like, this seems very strange to me, I think we really ought to consider what we're doing in some detail before we make a decision. Okay, said character 3. Don't you agree? Right, now there's nothing grammatically wrong here, right? Okay. But the problem is here is this is daft, said character 1. It's very easy for us as the reader to go, character 1 said that. Yep, you're right, said character 2. I should have full stops on the end there. Sorry about that. This seems very strange to me, and you're thinking, who's saying this? Is this character 1 again? Because it's their turn, right? It's their turn to talk. This seems very strange to me. I think we really ought to consider what we're doing in some detail before we make a decision. Oh, it's character 3 saying that, is it? Okay. Okay. I thought it was character 1 for those 3 lines. This would be better structured like that. Okay, so take that piece of text out of there and put it into there. Okay. And leave it like that. Okay, this seems very strange to me, said character 3. Okay, so it's just easier for the reader to get a grip on who's saying what. Okay, And so there's a thing in terms of structuring your dialogue into readable chunks. The other thing I recommend is if you've got a load of description, right, about a really cool place, right, like that. Okay, and that could go on. Let's do that, right? A whole bunch of description, which is really, and you know, you've taken all the lessons of the stuff before, and it's basically excellent. Okay, so you've got a nice chunky paragraph telling your readers what's going on. Okay, I would always recommend you start a piece of dialogue on a new line. Okay, so you know, wow, look at this place. Okay, said character 4, and then look, word changing my stuff again. Stop it. Okay. And typically, the editing suggestion is that this should be indented a little bit as well, just to differentiate it from the normal paragraph. Okay. Bilbo Gavins, that's a good suggestion. Would it be better to begin character 3's sentence with something like character 3 chimed in? This seems very strange to me. You can do that. It depends. That's a bit more of a sort of stylistic thing. It depends on the flow. I tend to always lead with the dialogue and then very quickly explain who it is, simply because I want the reader to be focusing on the dialogue, and the dialogue will sort of imply that you know, character 3 in this case has jumped into the conversation and basically interrupted something else. Now you can do other things. We'll come on to that. That's a good suggestion. In fact, if I open up a current work in progress where I've got the right formatting, so you can't read any of this. Okay, this is my work in progress. So I'm going to skip right down to the end, so you can't see anything, because I haven't written anything in the epilogue. Let's put that bit of text in there just for a moment. I won't save it because obviously it's rubbish. No, don't do that. Default paste. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to set this to normal, which is my style. Now I've got this set up so it automatically does the formatting. So notice it's indented things, and then yeah, it's cool. Said character 5. Okay, something like that. Now, if you put a new line in for each piece of dialogue, it just allows the reader to visually go, aha, yeah, there's some dialogue coming up. Okay, and it should be indented. Okay, it just breaks it up. So a paragraph will have an initial indent, and then it won't have an indent. And then each line of dialogue should really have its own indent. That's kind of good style. You know, there's nothing wrong grammatically to doing this. Okay, there's nothing wrong grammatically to do that. Okay, but notice if I copy and paste those paragraphs, it's quite hard visually. Before, you know, if you're reading it, the words are all the same. Okay, but it's quite hard visually to pick out the dialogue. Okay, it's just slightly hidden in the actual paragraph. Whereas if you break it out like that, notice how the dialogue jumps out of the description. Just, you know, the words haven't changed. It's just visually represented in a slightly different way. Okay, so it's just more visible, and it helps visually break up the big paragraphs on the screen. Sean, can I interject here with a script rule? Okay, double space with dialogue, and in between each different person speaking. Okay, so that's interesting. So yeah, I haven't done script writing, and yeah, so if you're doing something like that, there are different rules again for these. These are sort of my kind of, they're not really rules. This kind of recognise, you know, this is just of things to make your work flow a little bit more easily to the eye. It's almost like a visual thing rather than it is an actual word thing. So that's a recommended thing. It's not a rule per se. It's a recommended thing. Description, it's absolutely fine to have a big long paragraph. Okay. Personally, I wouldn't recommend it more than about 10 absolute tops. Yeah, if you get into a 10 line paragraph, you may be able to think about splitting that into something. But piece of dialogue, start it on a new line. Okay, just start it on a new line, because it just emphasises visually that some dialogue's happening, so it's not lost inside the description paragraph. That to me is a helpful thing. Now going back to, let me just control. That's one thing you can do in Word. There we go. This question now. We went back to where was it? I've used my one exclamation mark. Yeah, I have. You can. You certainly can move. I could change this one to character 3 interjected. Something like that. And you could do that, and then I need to delete the said because I obviously don't need it. Now, is that better? Or would I be better off doing it maybe like that? I don't know. The problem with this approach for my personal preferences is it breaks up the flow. It's like, if you think about this conversation in real life, it would be, this is daft. If you imagine 3 people, it'll be, this is daft. You're right. Seems very strange to me. There wouldn't actually be a pause in the dialogue. So having this in there for me breaks the flow a little bit, and I'd rather have that inside here. We could still use injected in that case. That's not a great choice, but you know what I mean. Okay, it's like the narrator jumping into the dialogue, and it's kind of feels a bit like it's pausing the flow of the story. Now, if you want to imply, now here's the thing that is definitely not a rule. However, let's do this. Let's leave it like that for the moment, and I've got a space in here. This is daft, said character 1. Yep, you're right, said character 2. This seems very strange to me, said character 3. Okay, that feels a little bit more natural. Okay. Now, if you want to imply an interruption, you can do something like this. Yep, you're right, and then go ... Okay. Okay. So that is technically an ellipse. Now, an ellipse has a very specific grammatical meaning, which I'm ignoring here. Okay, and this is something that's become very, very common, and it's actually grammatically wrong to do this. Okay, but who cares, right? Rules are there to be broken. So modern usage of the ellipse tends to be an indication that something in the conversation has been cut off. Okay, so this would now read to most people like, this is daft. Yep, you're right, and this seems very strange to me. Okay, because character 3 is now being implied to interrupt character 2 and speak over the top of them. So that's, and I've got no idea. I can't remember what the ellipse actually is supposed to be used for. It's not actually supposed to be used for that, but it's very, very common in modern writing to use it in that form. So there we go. Interjected was is the word I would use. Now again, I wouldn't, for the vast majority of the time, said is fine. Okay, you don't need to go, I need to replace said with something else and come up with a different word every time somebody speaks. Don't bother. You can some things you replied. I wouldn't go down to the interjected or even worse, ejaculated. Don't do that. That's just, don't go there. So those sort of things. Most of the time is said is okay. All right. If you've only got 2 characters, you don't even need to use said. It's perfectly valid to just go, I'm character 1. That's interesting. I'm character 2. Okay, that's fine because you've only got 2 characters, right? It's clear. It's quite obvious who's speaking. And to put it in a slightly less silly one, Kiwi sat down and looked at the distant horizon. and we've still got miles to go. I know Rue said it's a long way. Okay, and then after that, it's not that far. Yes, it is, etc. Okay, we know who is talking. When there's only two people, it's okay. So masticated yet. Ellipse. There we go. Haunted Love says ellipses are usually used for omitted text or long pauses. So it's one of those rules that's been broken quite a lot now. The use of ellipse. It's not necessarily implying a missing word or a long pause. It's actually basically implying that the next person is interrupting the person. Stop critiquing my writing on the spot. This is not how I love it. Freaky deaky dude. What you don't want to do is, if for sake of argument, let me just cut and paste that bit there. Don't do this forever, okay? Because particularly if it's a long set of speeches, you can get lost. Okay, so you probably only want to go for 4 or 5 lines before you put in a, I don't know, Kiri insisted. Okay. Just to, it's still Kiri's. I've got the right voice in my head. Okay, so don't go too far down the line without giving the reader a cue as to who's talking again. It's just it's a comfort thing for the reader. Okay, yes, they're in the right place, because if it's a long old thing, you can get confused when you're reading something. You don't want it to be like straddling a couple of pages and the reader's going, Is that him or is that her? Is that him? Oh, I'm lost. I've got to go all the way back to the beginning now to figure out who's actually saying this. Okay, so things like that. Just be careful of. Now, if it's more than 2 people, I'm afraid you've got to spell it out all the time. Okay, you've got to spell it out all the time. Now there are a few little tricks to that, because what you don't really want is this. I'm character 1. Said character 1. I'm character 2. Said character 2. I'm character 3. Said character 3. Okay, if they're all taking turns, which they sometimes will and sometimes won't, it's going to get a little bit weighty. Okay. So the way I would break this sort of stuff up is, rather than do that, vary the dialogue. Character 3 looked at them both and pulled a face, and then change the dialogue a bit. Just to move it up a bit. I guess that makes me. Okay, break it up a bit like that. And then this one, because I've specified in the previous sentence character 3 is the subject of the viewpoint at this point in time, I guess that makes it character 3. That tells you, the reader, character 3 is saying that. Okay, so if you've got multi-scene places, you need to throw some other stuff in to break it up a bit. Otherwise it's just, and I'm saying this and they're saying that and I'm saying this and they're saying that and he's saying this and she's saying that and I'm saying, it's it's too dull. Okay, so you need to stick stuff in. All right. So I've seen that when a single speaker talks for multiple paragraphs, the ending quote is omitted in all but the last paragraph. Yeah, so that's the thing. There are little bits of pieces. If there's a speech going on, okay, and bear in mind most people don't give speeches. Okay, so speeches in books, be careful of speeches in books because they shouldn't be a commonplace thing. But if someone really is giving a speech on a topic, and that speech is being represented in dialogue, then the sentence can go on for quite some time, leading to a bit of a problem for the formatting. Now that's already beginning to get a little bit long. Okay, so what you tend to do is that the style format that I use is that I'm going to do a new paragraph at this point. Okay. Open it with a speech, having not closed the old one, and continue. This is therefore the second paragraph of the speech, which is clearly a long piece of dialogue which I've had to write down. And then eventually I get to the end of the speech, okay? And then we can close it, okay? So those are the sort of things to kind of bear in mind when you're, the actual construction and formatting of the dialogue. Now, the other one piece of tip I would give you, okay, it's going to bother the programmers. I know it's not. It feels a bit odd, but most of the time we don't know. Character speeches should be pretty rare. Okay, it shouldn't be very common for a character to give a speech. If you've got a lot of speeches in your book, you might need to have a think about it, depending on what you're writing. If it's a bunch of speeches, then clearly it makes sense. But if it's normal character interaction, people don't usually give speeches. Okay, so we'll have a little play with that one. Now the other one, if there's a bunch of dialogue, okay, like this, let's just go back to the previous one. I can Control Z my way back to the one I want. There we go, that one. Okay. Now there's nothing wrong with that. Let's put a Maru argued in there just for the sake of completeness. Now, if there's a big long piece of dialogue happening, all right, okay. If there's a big long piece of dialogue happening like this, particularly if it's an argument that's protracted, or there's lots of to and froing and something's being explained, so on and so forth. Another thing you need to do is, if it extends more than about half a page, and let's set this to a sensible font size rather than Looney Tunes font size. Let's take it down to about there, and let me show you roughly what it looks like on the page. Okay, so it looks like that, but I appreciate you can't see that now, but you know what I mean. So it's about half a page length, okay, of dialogue going on there. So let's just zoom it back up again so we can see it. Okay, what you need to do is you need something else to happen. Okay, so it's not that far. It's not that far. They're arguing back and forth. It's not a big argument, obviously, but around about here, okay, in that length of dialogue, something else needs to happen. The floorboards creaked from somewhere above. Okay, just interject something that breaks it up for the reader. Okay, there's a bird flew past a window. Anything, it doesn't really matter. Just have something happen that breaks the dialogue up. Okay, and it just cements the reader to being back in whatever place they were in. Before the dialogue starts. It's white room syndrome. So otherwise all the description tends to fade away at this point, and we're just listening to these two people doing whatever they're doing. You need to bring them back into bring them back into the environment that you're in, and that could be a noise like this one. It could be a sound. It could be a funny look from somebody. A bird flew past the window. It's one of the Drew space birds. What do you call it when a character has dialogue that just follows a different rules, such as death? Now again, that sort of stuff is that's very much down to you, the writer. Okay, so the example of death is that if we put death into this conversation, it's basically I think it's done by like this. You're dead. Said death. Okay. Freaky Doo-Doo's got to go. So there's a storm in the distance here. I'm keep losing the internet. I have to go, I'm afraid. Good to see you. Take care, Freaky Doo-Doo. I hope the storm isn't too outrageous. Take care. No quotes. Okay, so that is kind of breaking the rules. But obviously. what's his name? Guy with a hat like me. What's his name? Oh, brain. Pratchett. There we go. Terry Pratchett. Now, he's breaking the rules with a complete knowledge of what the rules are. Okay. So, if the thing is that Death as a character also kind of makes a bit of an impression, right? As a result of that, the grammatical rules are being broken, but they're being broken for a good reason, which is the emphasis of a different type of character. So you can do that, okay? There's no rule to say you can't, other than the grammar, and everyone ignores those anyway. You can do that. Now, one of the, if those of you who read any of my books, you'll notice that I don't use anything like that. I haven't got a character called Death in any of my books, but you'll notice that I use things like this. So I will use italics, for example. Doesn't this girl ever stop? Okay, that in my books, and it doesn't apply anywhere else, is that that's an internal thought. Obviously, in this case, it's Maru. Doesn't this girl ever stop? Yeah, I'm using italics there as an internalised thought that Kiri can't hear, but Maru's just thought, and we, the reader, because we're omniscient narrator, we can pick it up. Okay, so we've got privileged access into somebody's brain here. We can listen to their internal thoughts. So you get a little bit more of a feeling of what's going on in the dynamics of the conversation. That's what I use it for. Okay, but that's not a rule. That's just my stylistic. The other thing that I do is I use bold italics in my Shadewood novels to indicate a telepathic thought. Okay, yeah. So it would be something like this. You do know I can hear your thoughts, right? Okay. So in this case, Kiri's heard it. In my books, I use this a lot. Is that italics is an internalized, private thought for that individual, which we as the reader can see, observe. Whereas the bold italics in my books is a thought that is projected into somebody else's mind, like kind of telepathy. That's how I do that. Now that's my style. That's something that I do, which I keep consistent in the book. The death thing that Terry Pratchett did is his invention, if you like. That's how he does it, to give his character a slightly otherworldly kind of sense. Okay, it's clearly different to everybody else. Now, how you do it is entirely up to you. Now, some people do this, okay, to emphasise. So let's go back. I know Maru said it's a long way. It's not that far. Yes, it is. It's not that far. Yes, it is. It's not. And then some people will do that. Okay, they'll put italics in to emphasise a particular word. Okay, so again, that's okay. It depends on how you want to do it. What you must do, however, is whatever you decide to do, stick to that in your book, okay? And ideally in all of your writing, if you can, depending on what you're doing. It's all you need to do is be consistent throughout the book, okay? So if you use italics for emphasising a word in spoken dialogue, always use italics for emphasising spoken words in dialogue. Don't suddenly use it for internalised monologue, okay? Because it will confuse your readers as to what's going on. So figure out what you need. I find I need internalised thoughts a lot more often than I need to emphasise particular things. So if I wanted Kiri to, the way I would do this to emphasise the word not is I would rewrite the dialogue like this. I would take that out of there and do that. And maybe use up one of my exclamation marks. It's not, Kiri insisted with a glare, that far. Okay, and hopefully you get you kind of get her kind of into her exasperation with the conversation at this point. That's there's lots of ways of getting over the emphasis of the dialogue that you're trying to talk about. So that's a bit on the structure. Okay, that's a bit on the structure. Let's talk about now the actual dialogue itself. Okay, what do people say? Okay, now there's a few things. They did have a pointless argument. They always have a pointless. Arguments are usually pointless, aren't they? The dialogue, and again, this depends a little bit on what type of story you're telling. In some books, the dialogue is really just there for the characters to exchange information with each other, and then they go about doing whatever the thing is that they're doing. In other books, more like my sort of books, the dialogue is actually the thing that's driving the story forward, because that's the only way the characters get to know what to do and where to do next. So the dialogue between them is very, very important, and that's the only mechanism the characters have for working with each other and doing this sort of things. Now, it depends very much on what you're aiming for. Sometimes your dialogue can be quite perfunctory, quite flat, quite informative, without a great deal of emotion in it. Now, I mean, for example, a good example of this is Arthur C. Clarke. If you read most of his stuff, the conversations in his stories of most of his characters are pretty laid back. Okay, they'll just talk and they'll exchange information because they're just professional type people who don't get riled by anything, and they just explain things. And if there is any angst, it gets called out in the description to say, and he was a bit angry about that conversation but decided to do nothing about it. Whereas the dialogue in his books is pretty emotionally level, I suppose is the fairest way to go. But now, other authors, myself included, will tend to try and inject as much emotion into the dialogue as possible, so that you, the reader, are picking up the emotional cues from what the people are saying rather than how it's being described. That old show don't tell thing is coming out a little bit here. It's not a hard and fast rule, so don't feel that your dialogue has to be emotive all the time. That's something I do strive for because that's kind of my style, but it may not be yours, so don't regard that as a thing that you have to do. But to play around with a few examples, okay. So if somebody said this is very, very annoying, I'm not very happy. I mean, you people would probably say things like that. That I've heard people say that. But it's not very natural dialogue. Okay, you're more likely to hear someone say, Okay, that gives you more of a sense of what's happening in that person's mind at this particular point, right? It's the same, but this is telling us in dialogue, whereas this is showing us in dialogue. Okay. Nutromancer, what's your experience of interactive fiction? What do you mean by interactive fiction? Nutromancer, you might need to just define that for me a little bit. So that is a more emotive sentence than that one. This one is describing emotions. Generally, people don't tend to speak like that. Text-based adventure games like Infocom's Hitchhiker's Guide. I like. I do like games like that, to be honest. I haven't written an adventure game, I must admit. Maybe one of these days I'll give a try at that kind of thing. It's not something I've tried. I suppose my work is mostly static literature. It's very dark. You're like to be eaten. So those sort of things. I haven't written anything like Warlock or Firetop Mountain or anything like that. That would be fun to try, but I've never tried it. That'd be quite interesting to give that a whirl. That's a very good point by Glenn. Everybody uses contractions when they speak, almost exclusively. There's very, very few people who don't, and they're a bit weird. Okay, so if you want to call out something as a little bit strange, don't use contractions. So quite often you'll notice, Data from Star Trek is a classic example. He does not use contractions, should I say, except when he does. fewer times when the script writers or the acting was wrong. But in general, he does not use contractions. Therefore, his words are quite disjointed at all times, and it's got that slightly robotic quality, which emphasises the fact he's an android, right? So that is quite good. That's a technique you can use. The way you describe things, if you want someone to come across as a bit more mechanical, for that sort of reason, that makes a lot of sense. Yoda, for example, will be speaking backwards. A good writer you will be, yes. Yeah, all that sort of stuff. Differentiates the character. That's something, again, a technique that you can use. And putting styles like that into your dialogue is absolutely fine. Because if that's the way the character speaks, that's the way the character speaks. There are a few things I would recommend that you don't do in dialogue. So a lot of people try, it's way less common now than it used to be, but I used to find it incredibly annoying, is people try and do accents in dialogue. So, for example, this is the sort of thing that we might say, wow, that guy is going to be a goner. Okay, there may be parachute or something is not open, and it's tempting. And some people would write this. Okay, wow. I can't spell now. Yeah. That guy's gonna be a goner or something like that. And then maybe do things like G's and stuff like this. Okay, my recommendation would be to avoid that, because what you're doing is you're kind of inflicting an accent on your readers which they might not be all that familiar with. Best just to leave them with the actual plain vanilla English version of it and let the reader decide what the character sounds like. Okay, so some characters will be less formal than others, and in your head as the writer you may have someone with a Scottish brogue or an Irish lilt or a formal English accent or something like that, and so gee milkers whizzes, gee whiz, gosh, so just be careful of that. I mean, you can chuck some bits in, but just be wary of overdoing the interpretation of the accent in the text. And particularly don't add in extra characters to make it emphasize it. I mean, if we were taking let's say Mr. Scott from the Enterprise, you could write him as I kind of get any more. Is that right? Poor. It's also correcting me. Yeah, Captain. Don't do that. Okay, you've got to be a bit careful of those sort of things. So you don't need changing that to power is probably kind of okay. I don't know if I came across that in. It's a difficult one. It is a difficult one. So you've got to kind of Am I taking the Mickey out of an accent here, or am I trying to represent it correctly? Be aware of that sort of stuff. Amongst the Scottish say, I think you can read it in the chat. Always sounds good. There are things like that. So just be careful of those sort of things, because if you're not, and there's all sorts of words in those languages that you may want to represent accurately, but if you're going to represent that language actually, for God's sake, make sure you do. Okay, just make sure you get it right. If you're going to don't do a kind of a low version of French or something like that, because it's just not going to work. So just be aware of that sort of stuff. That's it's quite great. Here you go, Sean's already started with stuff. Now we all know the French say "z" at the beginning of every sentence. Ever said it's only once. It's like that. It's what's my favourite Scottish one? It's a bra look mun look look look. I can't write that in a piece of dialogue. That would just be crazy. And to be honest, I mean, it's funny. Obviously, with um, you know, different dialogues. Particularly, I mean, it depends. This is probably more a problem for the UK than it is for some of the other countries because of the fact that we have got so many regional dialects. But I find it better not to take the mickey out of different accents. It's probably just a health warning, really, more than anything else. Nadog Goding. Got yourself in trouble with someone saying I've been. Yeah, well, that's right. I think you've just got to, be aware of that one. So just be sensitive about it. If we get to calling you a poor bag, but listen very carefully. I shall say this only once. Where are the nuclear vessels? Yeah. So there's a choice. I mean, that's Chekhov, isn't it? Where are the nuclear vessels? Of course, is the correct thing that he's actually saying. So is it in this case, said Chekhov. Okay, is it? We know Chekhov is Russian, or actually, is he Russian, or is he? I can't remember, Latvian or something. I can't remember where Chekhov is from. Is he Russian in Star Trek? We know we know he can't do V, so he sounds like he said, where are the it sounds more like that. Where are the nuclear vessels? Okay, I personally wouldn't do that. Okay, I would always write where are the nuclear vessels? Okay, and in some description earlier on in the book about Chekhov, I would say he's got a very strong accent and tends to drop his. It's much easier in TV shows and films to do that because you can hear the character. I wouldn't necessarily go out of my way to emphasis within the dialogue, but that's me. That may not apply to you, but just he was born in Russia. There we go. Okay, so there we go. But I would stick with that rather than the changing enforcing the pronunciation inside the dialogue itself. Because it just looks odd. It's spelt wrongly and stuff. It's not very good. So that's a personal preference. Again, be aware of it, and just sort of bear those sort of things in mind. Now the other thing. Okay. Now here's a big thing about dialogue. Okay. You're talking about people speaking. Okay. Now if you go anywhere and don't do this in a creepy way, all right? But he says this is good advice. Chekhov had a hard time and stuff. People kept asking about his gun. Very good. So when people are speaking, okay, they don't play nice with each other. Okay, if you listen to people having a conversation, and again, if you, and writers, it's okay for writers to do this. Just be aware that some people may consider this a bit weird. Okay, don't do it in a creepy, weird kind of a way if you can avoid it. Okay, writers do need to observe people to pick up things, but okay, don't try and avoid being seen to be observing, if that makes sense. So what you'll notice is when people, there are a few things that you'll generally notice. Now, again, these are not hard and fast rules, but they are very common. Okay. Is if you see two people or three people or a number of people who are familiar with each other, i.e. they're friends or they know each other well, and so on and so forth, they frequently, most of the time, will not address each other by their names, okay, because they know their names, is that right? So their dialogue doesn't contain any names in it. So you wouldn't have something like this. Kiri! Lovely to see you again. Okay. It's been a while. Okay. That doesn't happen. Okay. Generally. Okay. Where people do use their first names is to attract attention for something. Kiri! What are you doing? I'm over here. Yeah, can you see me? Oh yeah, I'll be there in a minute. They'll do that, but they won't, in the midst of a normal conversation, throw their first names in. So if you have dialogue where you've got lots of first names being referenced, you probably don't need them. They'll probably sound a bit false. Okay. Mad Monksoft's going to start talking to my friends that way just to prove you wrong. Yeah, Sean, you can of course use a descriptor. Let's go back to the previous point. He said that in his broad Scottish accent, and that bends the other way. Yeah, so you can leave it up to the reader to. Oh yes, okay. So he's got a Scottish twang. Yeah, whatever it happens to be to what he's saying. That's fine. But have a listen. Have a listen on this point. A lot of people argue this one with me and go, no, we use our names. You go and listen to your conversation. Okay, that you don't very often. Other than the initial contact, okay, you very rarely refer to somebody's name in conversation. So you might have Kiri, it's lovely to see. Hey, Kiri, it's lovely to see you again. You would have that to start with, and then maybe hugs. Blah, blah, blah. After that, the names don't get mentioned. Okay, so listening to how conversations work, it's quite interesting. The other thing you'll notice is that people speak generally, and somebody's already mentioned it, that people don't generally talk in speeches. Now, there are obviously exceptions to that, and there's exceptions to all of these things. Okay, there are all exceptions to all of these things, but generally, people talk in short sentences, and they interrupt each other all the time. Okay. And Sean's right. If it's blokes, we address each other with some derogatory terms most of the time. Okay, yeah, you'll get, and all those sort of things. Yeah. you'll do that, yeah. Or you've got a pet name for somebody. A lot of derogatory stuff is very common particularly in the UK. It's possibly less so in other cultures, but that's something that is very common. Dude, guy, yeah, mate, how's it going? You'll do that. That's very, very common in dialogue, and interrupting happens a lot. Okay. First time chat from Wataki Kyoto. How would you inform the reader that it's Maru, and that Kiri is not that Kiri is not seen in a long time? So I would put some a description in here at the top. Something like you saw. This is awfully cliche. I saw her across a crowded room. Was it that girl he met years ago? Yes, it was. Something like that. Okay, and then call out Kiri. Wow, yeah, something like that. Okay, that's that's awful. That's an awful piece of writing, but something like that. Okay. Just introduce, so the reader knows what the heck's going on with this meeting. Okay. Mate down there, pal, north of the border. Boy, here on Orkney. Is it really? Okay. That's okay to start with. But again, once you get into it, Kiri and Maru would not reference each other's names because they know who they are. I'm not your pal, mate. So have a listen. The next time you get the opportunity to just earwig on somebody else's conversation, okay, don't get caught earwigging on other people's conversations because that would just be weird. But just try and observe the structure of the communication. What you'll normally find is people they interrupt each other and they talk in a very funny way. If they're discussing, let's say, last night's TV or something like that, they'll go, did you see that thing on the telly? Oh yeah, that was awesome, wasn't it? Did you? Well, the bit about the did you get that as well? Oh yeah, wasn't that? Oh, that was awesome, wasn't it? Yeah. Did you see the thing? And what about when so and so? What was their name? Oh, that actor off. What's it called? That's how people talk. Okay. They don't go, did you watch the game last night? Yes, it was excellent. I thought the footballer was superb, the way they kicked that into the net. Yes, the network was particularly good. They don't take turns, all right, with fully formed sentences. Okay, that's not generally how natural dialogue between normal human beings, if there is such a thing, actually happens. We interrupt each other all the time. Oh yeah, that was awesome. Oh, did you see the way he kicked in the back of the net? That was just, I haven't seen anything like that since when was that game? Back in the 60s. That's how people talk. They'll jump around in their sentence constructions. Okay, and it's better to represent that to dialogue. So you can write that like this. Okay, yeah. Did you see the game last night? You can write it in a perfectly normal way. You know, that was something else, wasn't it? Yeah, that thing with the handball. Yeah, outrageous. Yeah, you can yeah. That ref was okay. That's more natural sort of dialogue, all right? Okay. Yeah, did you see the game last night? Oh, that was something else, wasn't it? That thing with the handball. Oh, outrageous. That ref was out of order. You know, that's more like natural dialogue. So try and build that sort of slightly more natural thing into it, rather than having a much more prescripted conversation about the specifics. Okay, so you're trying to get, you know, the idea of this particular conversation is that obviously there's two football fans, which I don't know a great deal about, but so it's okay if this one don't get caught, right? Yes, there's a few dodgy things. Writers are strange folk, Wintermute. You've got to bear that in mind. Here we go on other people's conversations for research. I mean, I don't know how to recommend that in a safe way, actually, but you know what I mean. Okay, you've got to get a feel for it. You know, so it's trying to find a natural flow of dialogue is tricky. Okay, it is tricky, but you'll know when you get it. Okay, now the other trick to writing dialogue, and let's compare. Let me write this thing again in a kind of more amateurish sort of way. Did you see the game last night? Yes, I did. Wasn't it a good game? It was a good game. I did think the instant with the handball was wrong though. Yes, I quite agree. I think the referee was incorrect. Okay, that's the same dialogue, okay, but written much more amateurishly. All right. Now the trick is that bad dialogue doesn't initially show up, okay, because you can interpret it a bit and you'll go, yeah, okay, I see what they're talking about. They're talking about the handball. Yeah, it all kind of makes sense. It's okay. Now this is nowhere near the same quality of dialogue as that, and I could probably do a lot better if I spent a bit of time editing this. Okay, but if I read this out to you, okay, it'll sing to you as good and bad dialogue. Okay, so yeah, did you see the game last night? Oh, that was something else, wasn't it? That thing with our handball, outrageous! That ref was out of order. Okay, you can imagine that conversation. Whereas this one, did you see the game last night? Yes, I did. Wasn't it a good game? It was a good game. I think the incident with the handball was wrong though. Yes, I quite agree. I think the referee was incorrect. Okay, just doesn't sound natural. Nobody talks like that. That's their acting. Okay, I do declare. Yeah. So here's the trick. Okay, if you want to test out your dialogue, I've said this many times on the stream before. Okay, I've said this. Read it out loud to yourself in front of a mirror. If you can stop from laughing, then your dialogue's probably okay. Okay. So read your dialogue out loud. Not in your head isn't good enough because your head interprets things. All right. Read it out loud. If it can survive being read out loud without you going, oh, I'm not sure this sounds like. Right, then it's probably okay. Okay, it's probably okay. The second one sounds like a script from Rainbow. Yeah, you see, and that doesn't feel like a conversation between two real football fans, right? It just doesn't. Said George Giuseppe. Nutrimentor makes a good point here. Like, okay, so what about kind of crutch words and stuff? You can put them in. I do tend to do that sometimes. So, maybe like this. Oh, yeah, like that. Maybe. Although, what would you put here? Yeah, you could do that. That was something else. Those are kind of okay. I wouldn't do it too much, but you can do some of it. And then maybe here I put add sort of like that. Yeah. You can add in various bits and pieces to make it flow around a little bit more, sort of stuff. If I wrote the second one in a less formal manner, wouldn't it be all right if you were trying to establish the campus here? It would be, but generally I don't observe, football fans speaking very calmly about last night's football match. They're very animated about it, and you probably want to kind of get that sort of thing into the. And this is emphasised to make a point, but what you're trying to do is inject some emotion into your dialogue. Okay, so you want the reader to come away and go, these guys are passionate about football. Okay, and they're put out by an event in that. Whereas you don't get any emotion from this text down here at all. There's no emotion in it. So try to get your dialogue to evoke the emotions of the characters that are saying. Because what you don't want, you shouldn't need to do is, you shouldn't need to do something like this. Okay, that's bad writing. I mean, it's got an adverb in it for starters, so that's a bad mark. Yes, I did. Wasn't it a good game? Said character too excitedly. I mean, sounds like the famous five, doesn't it? Sounds like something out of Enid Blyton. So, whereas, well, that was something else, wasn't it? It's exciting. You can tell the person who's saying that is exciting. What you want to do is you want to take out any of this adverby stuff. That's got to go anyway. You've got to find a way of putting that into the dialogue. Okay, it's very important that the emotion is in the text. If you're finding that you need, or you feel you need to put an adverb in to tell the reader what emotion is going into the dialogue, your dialogue's wrong. Okay, if you're finding you need to put excitedly or aggressively or shouted or anything like that into the description, your dialogue isn't carrying the weight of the emotion of what you're trying to convey. Go and rewrite the dialogue, all right? And any good editor will go, don't do that. Rewrite what they're saying to have more emphasis, okay? So that's an important consideration. So your dialogue is, in many places, in many parts of the book, is a place where you spend an awful lot of time tweaking the words, okay, to get the right emotive piece out of it. To make sure that whatever this phrase is capturing the essence of the emotion that you're trying to get that character. There's some outrage going on here. You're trying to. I mean, I've used the word outrageous, which maybe isn't bad. Maybe I could just delete that. That thing with the handball, madness. Oh, that ref was out of order. Maybe there's a slight shake of the head or something like that to indicate the kind of exasperation or something like that. But don't say they said exasperated. Okay, that's bad writing. Don't use adverbs to tell the reader what emotion they should be feeling. The reader should be picking up from this. Okay, so here's two people who like football and they're outraged about something that happened. Right? That ref, that's fine. Okay. Yeah. People when they have emotions, they tend to their dialogue reflects it. Okay. If people now here's Bill Berghammer make a good point. So what happens if we're in a reflective scene? Okay, so the emotions are more subtle. So let's imagine two characters. Looking at let's say a field of a beautiful meadow or a waterfall or something. Okay. I would tend to write something like this. It's just, I don't know. I've not seen anything like this. Just enjoy it. I'd write something like that. Okay. just to get the emphasis that there's something that they're looking at or viewing that is, the characters are struggling for words, and it's okay for the characters to struggle for words, okay, because they're human. What I wouldn't expect to see here is as one of the characters suddenly going all poetic. Oh, isn't it wonderful how the dappled light is flickering off the crashing water as it tumbles into the bottom of the ravine. No. It would just, oh, wow, look at that. If you listen to people who, if you walk around at a national park or a place where there's about to be a really good view, okay, if you listen to how people react as they turn the corner, they don't say much. They just go, oh, wow, look at that. Isn't that, oh, that's something. I haven't seen anything like that before. That's just, oh, wow. That's how people react in astonishment to things. So observe things like that, okay? That view is most efficacious, exactly. Yeah. No, they don't say, that's not what they say, unless they're weird. Now, if your character is weird, then it's okay to do that, but make sure they're consistently weird. So it's fun to observe things like that. Observe people in different situations just to sort of see how people react. So that's how I would treat those kind of things, to emphasize the fact that the characters are looking at something and they're kind of like a bit blown away by it. Anger is arguably one of the easier ones to do. Love and joy and sorrow and all those other emotions can have different effects on people. If somebody is crying, or is very upset, they will tend to be very staccato, or ramble all over the place. So you might get something like this. Yes, but he said that. I'm not sure. Maybe I read it wrong, but what do you think? It'll be that sort of stuff, okay? That's how upset people talk. Okay, they keep going. They're moving too fast. Okay. Oh yeah, 4 ellipses. Sorry. So they move all over the place. Okay, because they're thinking multiple thoughts simultaneously, and that comes out in the dialogue. So if you want to represent that emotional state in dialogue, don't adapt the dialogue so it's broken and fractured and going all over the shop, and that sort of thing. And they're full of self-doubt. And if you want to get those kind of things across, or they're just upset, I don't know what I did wrong. Why is this happening to me? You'll hear those sort of phrases a lot. This isn't fair. Also for emotional things, particularly strong emotional things. Remember the shock cycle, which is basically which order is it in? Let me get this right. So it's kind of shock, surprise, kind of denial, anger, and then acceptance. There's another one in there as well. I can't remember what it is. So if there's a traumatic event, human beings tend to go through this cycle. That's kind of the, oh my God, why this can't be happening. It's not fair. I'm going to have to deal with it. Kind of thing. We all, human beings go through that cycle. Okay, so if you have a character going through a traumatic event in your story, to start with, it's okay for them to be all kind of surprised. Then they are likely, this can't be happening. And then is outrageous. Is it bargaining? Yeah, it's something in there. Yeah, it's worth looking that up. That I think it's called the bad news cycle. Little emotive, things like that. That's how most people process traumatic event, or not. I'm not talking PTSD type traumatic events. That's an entirely different level of thing. But a character that has a shock will go through these stages, and that's a natural human thing to do. Okay, and so if you can reflect that in your writing, your character's going to feel that much more realistic to a reader who goes, oh yeah, I can see where they are in that process now. And even if they don't know the process and the sequence, it'll just feel right. the bad news or grief cycle. There we go. So look that sort of stuff up, because it can be a real useful aid to your writing, and because it just makes your characters more realistic, because they have to deal with isn't that stages of grief? Denial, anger, depression. Yeah, so I think grief and shock in some ways is quite similar. So if it's, I think it probably is more grief in that sense. That's a good observation, Bilbo. That tends to be how we process loss and things like that. Shock cycle introduced dizziness, lightheadedness. Yeah, so if your character has been whacked about the head or has had a nasty fall, don't expect them to be lucid. Okay. I had a lot of fun in one of my stories. Can't remember which Shadewood book it was. I think it was 3 actually. I can't remember. I go through all those stages within 5 minutes. Everybody with their laugh goes off. I think we've all been there. I had a situation where some of my characters got drunk. Okay, they started drinking this stuff, and it was super strong, and they hadn't realised, and they basically got drunk. From the reader's perspective, they suddenly realise the characters are starting to behave a bit oddly, and then their dialogue reflects that they're drunk and they can't pronounce things properly. So that was an instant where I did use mispronounced words, because that's what happens when people get drunk. Okay, they accidentally mispronounce things and get things wrong. And their dialogue, if you listen to drunk people, which can be quite entertaining as long as they're not trying to threaten you with anything. Listening to drunk people can be quite amusing, because they will either be overly friendly, oh yeah, you're my best mate, go on there, all that sort of stuff. And you can represent that in dialogue, and it gives the clue to the reader. Okay, that guy's had way too much to drink. And it brings you into the scene. So dialogue can be a very powerful way of telling the reader what's going on, what the emotional state of I love you, mate. Yeah, that's really funny. Who wants a kebab? So that's the thing. Glenn raises a good point in terms of swearing and stuff in dialogue. Now, I think that depends very much on your own personal preferences and the audience you're aiming the book at. Now, if you're writing a gritty novel about, and you want it to be realistic about something that's taking place in a prison or an army barracks or something, you can't have everyone going, oh gosh, darn it. You just can't. Okay. It's your choice as to how much of that you want to put in. You will be making, affecting the audience who will enjoy your book, regardless of the choice you make. Okay, so if you put a lot of swearing in it, some people will just say, no, I can't read this. I won't read it. And if you don't put swearing in where it's kind of expected and anticipated, you'll get the opposite reaction from a different type of people who basically say, well, this is a load of rubbish, this person has clearly never been in a prison, because it's just not realistic. So it depends on what you're writing or what your audience is. I do have the occasional swear word in my books, and even very, very lightly sprinkled the way I do it. I've had people complain, oh, you put a swear word in your book, I won't read it. It's like, really? Have you never heard somebody swear in public accidentally on purpose? So as you're kind of aware, probably having watched me for a long time, right, is that I don't swear very much. Okay, I just never have. I just never really seen the need for it. It's just not my style. That's not me. I don't have a problem with people swearing. I don't tend to. Just don't. I suppose I've spent most of my time in a very highly professional environment. It just isn't something that people do. So that's where I've spent my life. Now, if you've spent all your life down the docks or something, it's going to be completely different. And it's not a problem. It's just how you're brought up and where you acclimatised to. What you put in your books is entirely up to you. But be aware that you will be influencing the people who will find your stuff accessible to read. You can block it out with the random characters. It's interesting. If I do go back to that other example, what the is going on here? Everybody knows what that is, right? That is a big steaming load of. Everyone knows what's being said, right? But is it better? Some people find that acceptable. To me, it just looks untidy. Okay. So I'd rather, if I'm writing a novel that requires those kind of words, I'd probably go for those kind of words. I won't type that on screen because it's family friendly, but you know what I mean. So, of course, in the science fiction and fantasy realm, you can invent swear words, but inventing swear words is, as some of the examples have come in, is fraught with difficulty. Okay, it's quite hard to come up with a convincing swear word, right? Okay, it has been done. I think things like frack and smeg and felgercarb are actually pretty good because they're the sort of things you can sort of imagine people saying, right? Frack is a very good one, and I had a few in Shadewood which I use sparingly because it's very hard to come up with swear words that aren't real swear words, as it were, that sound convincing, because they're only swear words because they're very very common. Everyone understands what they mean. So swear words are a difficult one to use. So be careful of them. It's an ad for an Australian lager. Poopy pants. Very strange lager. No, and fake swear words can sound just false and kind of like really it doesn't quite work. So and sometimes it's just to get past the censor on TV. So frack, for example, from Battlestar Galactica is a good one because frack. And I think if you're going to invent a swear word, most swear words generally only have one or two syllables because they're easy to say. So if you are going to make up some swear words, I would stick to one or two syllables. The Castlemaine 4X, yes. So that's quite fun. Sothy St. Gotwell is gifting some subs to folks. Thank you, that's very good. Appreciate that. So frack is quite a good one. I think that's quite a good one. Felgercarb I quite liked as well as a slightly longer one. Have things like frel and feck as opposed to all those sort of things. There aren't really any rules. I would just say just be careful because depending on who you're aiming a book at, you might have some sensitivities in those kind of areas. So I think that's quite a good one. Up your Bazaar collector, yes. Also, I mean, swearing can be quite country specific as well. Some words don't translate across countries at all. So bear in mind that if you're writing for an international audience, you might want to keep it a bit more plain vanilla in those kind of things rather than adding too much local colour, unless you're being specific about it. In terms of fantasy and science fiction stuff, would those words exist in those locales at all? Is a question you kind of need to ask yourself. I mean, the swear words that we have today have been around for quite a long time, and they seem to have stayed with us, as it were, for in some cases quite a few centuries. But would they still be around in 2,000 years? Or and it depends also how you're thinking about it. Or are you just translating the future dialogue into modern day English? It depends how you view dialogue, but. Use them sparingly, use them with thought, and only use them to emphasise something really, really, big. I would guess. That's how I tend to use them. And there are words that don't translate between cultures and languages, even if they're speaking the same, close to the same language. There are, for example, swear words in the UK that don't translate into the US and vice versa. just doesn't work. Okay, because if you delve into the dialogues of different parts of different countries, there'll be all sorts of stuff that just has no translation, but doesn't make any sense. So be careful on that one. It also depends on your character. Some of your characters may not swear. Some of your characters may swear like a trooper. All that sort of stuff. It's up to you to decide how you want to play that one. So there's no real rules on it. I personally would find literature that was full of swear words a bit off-putting. I just would get tired of it. But I know there are people who speak like that. I do occasionally encounter people. I said, you'll be able to get this information that you're trying to convey to me a lot quicker if you just took out all the swear words, because you're using them like punctuation. They're not adding anything to this sentence. Of course, I don't say that to them because they'd probably take offence. But, I mean, that does happen. Watakika, my understanding is that the English language that was written 200 years ago is unreadable in context to today's English. So that's very true as well. Language evolves. So I think if you're in a fantasy universe or a science fiction universe, then use it sparingly, if at all. I think that makes sense. You can also just put into the description, he cursed under his breath, and then continued with the spoken dialogue in the dialogue. You can do it that way if you want to. And Bilbo, Bilbo says a good point. It depends on the character. Some characters will, some characters won't. So you're a cad to the boundary of the highest degree, indeed. So those are things that that are quite interesting. The key thing you're going for with dialogue at the end of the thing is it authentic? Does it feel real? Does it feel like the sort of stuff people will say? If you want to really push yourself, and Sean, I don't know, Sean might have some advice on this one, in terms of dialogue that actually would make it into a TV series or a film, needs a lot of work to make it sound realistic. Okay, it needs. Don't underestimate the amount of tweaking that dialogue needs, particularly if you want to push your work beyond a book and into film, TV environment. Is that it's a really hard thing to do, to get genuine sounding dialogue that pushes the story forward, keeps the characters consistent and is believable. Okay, it's not easy. Don't expect to get it right first time out. Okay, it's hard to get good dialogue. It's worth it, but it's one of the hardest bits of writing is to get your dialogue up to the point where it sounds really, really, really tidy and realistic and all that sort of stuff. Book to screenplay adaptation is just madly hard. There we go, Elric 1024. But I bet Lord of the Rings dialogue was tweaked a lot. I'm sure it was, because if you look at the dialogue in the actual book, it's quite flat at times. It doesn't have that much emotion in it, and that's possibly a product of when it was written nearly 100 years ago now. Whereas in the films, there's peril and stuff happening, and then characters have to react to that. I find it personally, what I tend to do is I try as much as possible to visualize the scene in my head. So I've almost, when I'm writing scenes, I've got a kind of like a movie playing, and I'm kind of saying, okay, so he's sprinting across the the flaming battlefield as spears are flying. He's desperately trying to save the day. His dialogue is going to reflect what he's doing. He's not going to go, well, gosh, let's get over to the other side of the battlefield then. It's going to be, get out of the way, I'm coming. Whatever it happens to be. So and it will also change with time. Softly St. Gothwell is quite true as well. It tweaked to go for the thing. I've noticed that as I get older, I notice it more and more. I think, why is this dialogue so short and disjointed? Why don't they talk properly to each other? And then I realised that's how people talk now, as opposed to, let's say, 30 years ago when I was a young man. And things change, and people use slang that doesn't make any sense to us old timers. My kids are always coming home with new words. Dad, it's a thing, and they're like, it's a what? Oh, Dad, you're so old. It's just stuff changes. Okay, so if you want to accurately, I mean, this would be an absolute minefield for me. I'd hate to do it, but if you did want to write a book that accurately portrayed the way that young people speak to each other, you'd have to really, really do your homework. Okay, to make sure you were representing it accurately. Otherwise, you'd be found out. Harrison Ford to George Lucas. George, you can write this, but you can't get anyone to say it. Yeah, that's right. I mean, Mad Mark's, for example, if something is sick, it means it's really good. I don't know why, but that's probably not even a modern thing anymore. That's probably last season's modern stuff. Yeah, they've probably gone on to something else. And language changes. DJ Squid Wicked. That's what it was when I was growing up in the 20s. Yeah, that's well wicked. That is. I don't think people say that anymore. Cool is one of those words that seems to have stuck, doesn't it? Because cool is cool by definition. Gnarly. That's a very American sounding word. I don't know what that means. Pog is more common than sick, but both are still used. Okay. Totally tubular. So your dialogue can set a tone. This is the important thing. Okay, it sets a character tone. It's bogus, man. Yeah. So there's all sorts of things. So your character can set a tone. It can express emotions. It can drive the story forward. It can make you sympathetic with a character. It can turn you against a character. It's very, very powerful stuff, dialogue. So I would really recommend that if there's parts of your book that need polishing, the dialogue is where to spend your time. Okay, because you can really move things around. I mean, to use a I mean, this is possibly slightly sexist, but it's one of those ones that I think is a really good example of dialogue. If you're asking your wife or your girlfriend or your significant other about how they are feeling and they just say fine, then you're in serious trouble, right? And it's just a single word, fine. Yeah. Oh dear. Red alert, shields up, hull breach is imminent. Okay. So it's things like that. Okay. If you can get your character to say a single word and it just conveys massive amounts of information to your reader, that's good writing. Okay. My wife says, exactly. We all know that, right? But it's a single word. It's incredibly powerful, and that's what your dialogue needs to aim at. Not that all the time, obviously, but that kind of effect, right? Okay, such that the less that's spoken is still very, very powerful. You're sleeping on the couch. That's exactly right. So that's a good example of powerful dialogue, right? It expresses a thing. Alec Guinness only agreed to do Star Wars if Obi-Wan was rewritten, and after the film opened, Lucas gave Sir Alex an extra 0.25% of the box office takings for his help. So there you go. It's good dialogue. Pays the bills as well. So I think that's kind of it, really. So I hope that's been useful. I mean, dialogue is incredibly powerful. I think that's the thing to take away from it. If you're going to spend any time on doing stuff, dialogue is where to spend your editing time. It's really, really potent stuff, dialogue, and you can make or break a book on the dialogue. Mad Monksoft. I've tried that one as well. Didn't go down well. My wife once said to me, "Are you listening to me?" And I thought that was a strange way to start a conversation. Dear. Treading on very, 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 very dangerous ground here, my friends, because this gets streamed live. Okay, it goes out on YouTube, so we'll all be sleeping on the couch. Not the same couch, I hasten to add, but because that would just be even more weird. Right. On that note, I think it's time to call the halt of proceedings. But hopefully that's given you some insight into the powerfulness of dialogue. Okay, so just be careful what you say to whom. I think it's also the other bit as well. Take care, my friends. Obviously back on Thursday with more No Man's Sky on Friday. and stuff. And the streaming continues. We'll be back with more writing next week. Take care, my friends. Have a good week ahead. Look after yourselves. Be good. And I will see you out there. And as always, of course, write on, my friends, write on.